So let's start in the afternoon session. I give a brief outline what's going to happen. So we're going to talk about intro, strategic context in a company, an e-commerce setting, about hybrid search and our journey in hybrid search and how that led us to conversational search. And then I will probably leave you with some controversial or hot takes I have personally. And without further ado, I think we're going to start. And inspired from the talk in the morning that Angie gave with the question, you should ask LLMs who you are. I presented my who am I, presented by LLMs. So apparently I'm a pyrotechnician, originally based in Berlin. But I also have the original content version for that, and that's me, senior expert. Search technology is my role at Otto. I'm doing e-commerce search since roughly a decade, I guess, and recently more or less involved in tech strategy and search architecture, but relevance engineer at heart still, because that's how I started my journey. Okay, what's Otto? Otto is like a German e-commerce retailer. I guess many of you know it. Just a few figures here. We have like a bit more than 5,000 employees serving more than 12,000 customers with a catalog of 18 million people. Not 18 million people, 18 million documents or products coming from the company itself and more than 6,000 auto market partners. So what's the impact of search? We do have 1.8 million to 4 million searches per day. On an average day is less than on peak times. As you may guess, they come with different events in the year. And a few figures about how search impacts the revenue as well. So search suggestions, 60% initiate the searches. Probably obvious. Demand generation is like half of it from search, and more business-related figure to what's coming out of search is 40% of the clicks into the top 10 positions in the search produce this kind of revenue. Okay, so what are the key goals and the jobs to be done? Just a brief overview. So the figure on the left, so typically what you want to do with precision recall is to guide the people, to your customers, to the right kind of product they are looking for. But sometimes you just want to help them be engaged and discover something as well. So this is basically two kind of things, the goals you have. And as you may notice, they might be counterintuitive or orthogonal to each other. So not the same KPIs you're going to use for them. So this is how we define the jobs out of those kind of goals. Product understanding is important. User and query understanding is important. Search relevance is also important, and guided search for the right funnel as well. I'm not going to go into the details. It's just like a business perspective of what we want to do and achieve in search. So hybrid search, what does it mean in our search architecture? So this is actually a view of the query, I think it's Nintendo Switch 2, which was recently announced. You see a lot of different colors here. I'm going to explain it. It's like a little tool that we can use to actually look at the results we get from the different retrieval systems in our system and debug or look into what's going on. So different kinds of colors. Red is, or that reddish kind of thing is lexical. Blue is semantic, and yellow, or not really yellow here, but the other ones that don't have like blue or red, they are sponsored products. So some kind of sponsoring in the result lists. Okay, the colors are important. They're going to come back throughout the talk. So on a very high level about search architecture is like basically we do hybrid search consisting of lexical search and semantic. We have a business re-ranking layer on top of this. So in hybrid search, on the lexical search retrieval parts, there is like a first stage topical retrieval, and then business re-ranking comes on top, and then all the presentation of the products is being done in the front-end facing part. Diving a little bit deeper, the picture looks like this. So what I'm going to talk about today is how we ended up with building this kind of blending engine in between in order to make the whole system work as like a hybrid retrieval system. Okay, so let's move on. So why and how did we get there? Our approach to develop new features is like test-driven, like many other people probably in the e-commerce space are doing it. So we do a lot of experiments and run them out, test stuff, and if it is successful from a business perspective, which has different goals, there are different main metrics like buying stuff or actually making products visible. You see that we are doing quite a few of them in the search context. So this is the actual numbers from this fiscal year, so starting from March till end of August. And this is what our key approach is to improve things. So what I want to do with you here is I want to convince you that fast multi-team iterations with the approach of make it work easy and simple, fast, and then invest into making it right after you have proven that it works is the approach we take, and it makes sense. So I put the reference in there from Ken Beck. That's actually where I stole it from, which is used for software development on the ground. So you basically build something really simple in the very beginning, and then just make it work and make it right and make it fast. But the case I'm trying to make is that makes sense, and that's how we do our work here as well. So what are the challenges with hybrid search in our e-commerce scenario? So you have to get facets and selection right. So this is one thing that needs to be considered as well if you want to move the people down into like a direct funnel of products, or like few products, or if you want to put them in discovery mode, it's still sort of important, not that important anymore. You have to do this kind of rank fusion thing, so figure out which cocktail or which combination of positions is the best for the business and the customer. And you have a lot of non-functional requirements as well. We have been talking or listening to that all day, I guess, talking about latency, maintainability, scalability, and infrastructure cost as well. In our case, where we have a lot of teams actually working together on this, is also like a sport of do a good multi-team collaboration as well. Okay, so here's actually what happened. It's like a gradual rollout strategy for our hybrid search approach. It's divided in different phases. I'm just going to put like the explanation of what does this S mean here. That's like the top N from the vector search document, so the top N retrieval that gets mixed into it. So phase 0 was basically 0 hits and low hits. I think similar thing that Philip recommended in the talk before lunch. Phase 2 was like put this hybrid search and the semantic products into higher volume queries, so basically not only in the long tail queries, but more to the top, so basically I rolled it out in a higher volume. Phase 2 was like put more recall into it from the semantic engine, so it's like up to 500. And total recall, I named this here, is the phase for be able to basically scale it like you want. Okay, let's look into those phases in detail and how it looked like. I'm not really sure if you can see this. I tried to replicate the different states of how it looked like, which is difficult in today's situation where we move through it, but I try to visualize it here. So in the very beginning, we had like those weird typos. This is one I invented, so it's really wrong, really spelling gone wrong for this Nintendo Switch query. And it actually shows, okay, now you get a result with semantic search results, and basically it was competing against like a similar product page or an empty page. So the similar product page was query to query comparison of, okay, what's the next query that probably has a similar thing, and then rendering products or nothing at all. So what we decided not to do with the make it fast phase is we didn't use any facets, we didn't do any fusion, obviously, because there was nothing, and it was just restricted to the first page. So because that's where you usually get the clicks. So pretty much straightforward and low risk, as we have heard before, and it actually worked. So we did an experiment, and conversions were improving. So let's move to second phase. Now it's like more volume. So you have to think about, okay, could we improve that we actually see some faceting there? Can we, increase the number? Of course, we are going to increase it because of the fusion part, that we're going to have like maybe some results from lexical and then the 100 results from semantic. So you get something like 1 to 2 pages. With the architecture we choose, we were actually moving forward with an approach that was pretty much straightforward, but from an architecture perspective, somewhat questionable. We put the semantic retrieval in front of sort of the lexical search, so we can stuff the results into the actual search engine and use the faceting, because we didn't want to implement the faceting in the very first phase. So that worked in terms of making it work, but of course it had some implications, like latency, for example. So we tested this, so I jumped over this. So is this a great architecture? Probably. The question is, we want to move fast. So if you want to move fast, then maybe architecture can give for the moment, but later on, you're going to probably fix this when you're going to make it work and make it fast in the end. So after a few experiments, so that means, okay, we had a lot of experiments going on, not just one, we found a way how to do this and got some more conversions. So it was working. Then we go into phase 2 of this approach. And that's where we actually increased the recall for the results. So in the end, it's up to 5 pages or maybe more if you count the lexical results that are original and not coming up with the semantic as well, and also using a right kind of way of presenting the filters. And there's one nitpicking thing in there I will come back later on with, is that how you do the query embedding actually affects a lot how good semantic search part works in there. So you have to make sure that the combination for selection in the embedding of the query and the filter somehow makes sense if the customers are filtering results down. So I will come back to this later. So the architecture part in the bottom there, we decided, okay, from our search API layer, we're going to include orchestration in there and make this kind of happen parallel. So at least we get some kind of performance improvements there. Of course, business re-ranking is still going to be after it. So there are some hops in between that still impacted latency, but we were able to make it work within our bounds of non-functional requirements. Okay, so what happens? A few more experiments later, and I guess you're going to guess what's going to happen. So that worked as well from a business perspective. And that's when phase 3, what I named total recall, came in. Can we scale this? And is this maybe the time to think about architecture in a different way to make it work with good latency and also be able to scale it beyond the limits that were put in place in the very beginning. Also, we were looking into different kinds of rank fusion approaches, because in the very beginning and the phases before, we simplified the approaches, for example, by just, padding different kinds of results from different systems together instead of doing rank fusion or other things. We experimented a lot with different versions, but here's the phase where we, in the end, did proper rank fusion analysis in the experiments. Okay, but how does it actually work? So far, we made it work. Now it's time to make it right and make it fast and then go into the cycle of doing new stuff. So what are the requirements for our architecture in the end? So it's like being still able to be doing continuous experimentation, because that's what I showed you about the numbers in the very beginning. That's like our key goal, is keeping this up, being able to do experiments in ranking, retrieval, and presentation in all areas. We wanted to improve the cost and maintenance effectiveness of our solution, make it flexible for new components, like the query understanding or some similar stuff, or also the shiny Gen AI stuff that's happening right now in the recent years. Okay, so how did it look like? I already showed you. We put in this kind of blending engine. It's pretty much a straightforward step, I guess, but I will show you how that changed it. of course, it's not as easy as that. The layer below, hybrid search reality, is way more complicated than that. I'm not going to go into those kind of details, just to show you, okay, there's a little bit more work to do and things to think about than just on a higher, that is visible on just a high level like that before. Okay, so what's the impact? Hybrid search experiments in the hybrid search area alone. So we did like 14 different kinds of experiments. I'm going to say something about the 18 in a few minutes or a few seconds. We had like 5 successful rollouts. I can't tell you like exact details where are, the funny bits and the good bits about. I just can tell you about the experiment areas we were looking into. So this is basically the first one is the different kind of phases I have been talking about. We have been experimenting with the first phase ranking in the models. We have been doing different kinds of model type comparison, different kinds of embeddings, and also played around with product data. So what does this 18 mean there? There are actually a few experiments. I think we have a few more than there are counted here because it's like hybrid search context. This is experiments that are only for orientation, I would say. So discover things. So you build something and you look into the data and see, okay, what's going on. So this is not taking away so much time from A/B testing because you simply look into what's going on. Is your intuition working or not? And then you can basically stop really fast. So typically they don't run longer than like 1 a week or something like that. But they are important for direction you're going to develop things into the future. Okay, so I can tell you a bit about my personal favorite experiments because I can tell you the exact details of the results. So my favorite child thing here is not just numbers in terms of business perspective, but also of gains in terms of you learn things that you didn't know before. So hybrid everywhere, this was this phase 1 thing where we increased it from the low query segment to all the query segments we have in the volume. The semantic filters, that was part of phase 2. That's something that I mentioned briefly before. So what happened there was, in the early version, we used embeddings only for the query, but not for the combination of queries and used filters. And that actually didn't work as well as embed both of those informations. So this was actually an experiment. It was quite impressive. And last but not least, that's like everybody has heard it quite a few times in this conference, you're probably going to start with embedding vector search in e-commerce where you don't have anything or the results look not that good. Okay, so what about those non-functional requirements? So we typically look into core web vitals as our health measure for latency. So for those of you who don't know that, that's like public data. So it's also something that I think Google uses for ranking figures or ranking factors. So we look at LCP, largest contentful paint, and it's supposed to be faster than 2.5 seconds for 3 out of 4 people that use our site. So that's something we use for us. We also use the other ones, but for the sake of simplicity of this presentation, I'm going to work on with the LCP part here. And what you see here, I'm just going to put a baseline here. This is our graph for looking into this kind of data. This is not search. I'm just going to put it in here like a baseline. This is like a basic function in the web shop, which is the login. So there's no fancy complexity going on. You see it over time. This is actually a period from 6 months back from the beginning of September, so half a year. And you see the same thing that you had on the LCP thing here. So this is like the good end. This is the should be improved. Everything you see here, and this is okay, obviously bad. And it's still on the P75, so 3 out of 4 people. And this is how search result page looked in this time. And you can probably guess where the architecture was improved. That's at least I hope you can see it, because it was a few 100 milliseconds there, so I'm going to point it just right here. It's down there. Obviously, some other things changed there. The important part here is This is so much data, like 6 months. So important part is the upper bounds of this fancy thing moving up is the important part, but because that's where the business is happening. So the other part is basically when nobody or a low number of customers are visiting the shop. So something improved there as well. And when we map this to the different phases of hybrid search, we see interesting things as well. So the phase 1 was actually the rollout, so that was not so bad. But when we try to move it to a higher number of recall of results, something that obviously that is obvious happened, that of course latency is related to how much of a documents from semantic search you're going to include. So this is where we improved the architecture, and this is when the last phase with more documents than 500 started. So we simply see this jump because we were doing experiments with this number of 4,000 and up in that kind of phase. So in the end, my punchline is, okay, so user happiness depends on snappiness, so the faster you are, the better you're going to be, of course. Other impacts, of course, are there as well. So I mentioned before that in our setup, we have different teams delivering things. So semantic search is sort of a team, lexical search is sort of a team, business re-ranking is another team, and representation as well. So time for coordination plays a role as well. So on the left-hand side, you have this kind of lead time as like an improvement that happened with this. So less cross-team coordination was needed. So we had less development and testing. Maintenance was better because we didn't have to do this kind of cross-team debugging after the architecture change. And failure analysis is basically now, put into the vertical search parts. And availability changed as well. So one funny thing is, if you have a lot of capabilities of serving queries from different perspectives, suddenly funny things happen. If one system has an outage, it's not the same as before, because simply the other system is there and will jump in. So that's something we see as well. But of course, as I showed you, there's like this blending component in there. So there's like a new single point of failure component in there. So if that breaks, of course, you have a availability problem. So you have to be prepared for that. So availability is more on like a thumbs down and thumbs up. But anyway, for us, it was so far an improvement. And then the other part is this is actually a figure. I couldn't put the numbers here for obvious reasons, but it actually shows the weeks and the cost, and the graph is still in the scale correct. So it means that like 3/4 of the search infrastructure costs, we've moved from 100% to 70%. So we are on 3/4 of the cost after this change. Okay, so what are the punchlines I have here, and how is the outlook for conversational search and all the topics that belong into the future of AI? So from my personal perspective, this is what is important. Innovation, tech, and business value is connected. And this is how our journey over the past decade almost developed. And I put like a personal, factor in there, like the R&D lag we have in our search system in years. Of course, it's like not scientifically proven. It's just like, looking into how it probably was roughly. And it moved from like, being like 10 years or more behind into like, okay, so now we are working on conversational search, which is like something that integrates LLMs and goes to the customer-facing side. And we are like 2 years behind than it was like, when it was actually released for the public. So it's like moving up the needle and being close to the innovation everywhere. So, and how does it look like for us? The future of product discovery with LLMs looks something like this. So we are building a product discovery agent or chatbot actually to help our customers find products in a conversational way. So that's what you see here on the left-hand side. We also are working on doing this in a voice fashion, so you can actually talk about products and find products by talking to the assistant or the chatbot. And depending on how the direction is going to develop, we have also other features we tested, played around with, like inspirational searches, which are difficult to handle still with hybrid search, and building features like, okay, so clustering the results in a specific way with the help of LLMs, or actually, show what subparts of the results contain for us. So this is some different kinds of things we are playing around with. This actually is going to be hopefully live soon. And how does the stack in the era of LLMs look like for e-commerce search? So I took the really simplified version here again. So this is how our stack looks like. Search API on top of it. You build some, in our case, like a conversational app, could be something completely different, and you integrate some LLM provider to get the natural conversation going. But what's happening is something changes. From your systems, for one request from the customer, something turns into multiple requests from the API, and that's why I try to make the case. So for the search stack of the future, to be ready for this, you need to be API accessible, best with the formalized query language, so you can use this in tools with LLMs. It needs to be lightning fast, because that should be the fastest part into it, because time is going to be consumed in the LLM chains. And it should be dead cheap, because if that's happening, you probably better be fast as well and cheap as well, because if that multiplies your cost, then it would be a problem. And yeah, I put the funny part, scalable to infinity, just into it because you don't know. So the few cases I was showing the slide before, the first one was actually this one, and the calls we need to make this work and look like to the search API, it was actually, I think, a factor of almost 10 to actually render those kind of results, including the LLMs as well. So that's why I guess it needs to be scalable really well. And that in the end means probably that search or hybrid search is going to be like a tool for use cases in the end, because what we're going to do is, like, the demand is going to come from the customer side. It's not our decision if we're going to build like a conversational search bot, because if our customers expect, like half of them, that the experience should be like it is on OpenAI or Gemini or whatever your preferred provider is, then you should have it and you should serve it because it's expected. Okay, and then I'm jumping into like the conversational part there. So and the evaluation of conversational search or conversational e-commerce search. What you see here is like our take on, okay, how can we make sure that this system with the conversational assistant doesn't just simply go havoc, does things we don't want to know. And I would say the old tricks still apply. So simply build your custom metrics that reference or actually represent the business you want to do or the business case you want to do with it. In our case, it's like rendering recommended products, so just a few of them, but really matching the intent that is going on in the conversation. It is about conversation terms, so how much of a chattiness you're going to create with the dialogue, and repetitiveness as well. So that's the things we use now. There are some failure metrics as well. They are mostly related to what AI is doing at the moment. So in our case, how our prompt works or the whole construction works is make sure that there are products shown, because that's the whole purpose of the thing. So that's like the first one. And the second one is something that happens as well if you work with AI agents or LLMs, is tool failure. So if you want to have a few tools in your chain of doing a conversational search app, then that's going to break your case. So you want to better be measuring how much of a tool failure you have. And of course, if we are not live, that's the last part, that's before you go to production, you don't have any data. So you don't know how the dialogue is going to look like. So something needs to be there to make sure you can sort of understand what's going to happen if you put some use to it. And in that case, we use a similar approach as we have seen today. We use a LLM as a judge approach, which looked similar to what I think Fernando was saying. So we have our black box, which is doing the conversation. We have a simulated customer. And we have like a supervisor, which is actually the LLM judge. So we have like 3 LLM steps involved, and we want to measure how that works. So in the end, it's about having a sales advice quality, having search and filter quality. It's like about the tools below that, how good they work, and also how good the product recommendation quality looks like in the results. So this is basically like more of a grading system. We actually use like a school grading system for it to make it work and to see what's actually going on. Okay, some other old tricks in the LLM area. You have to look at actual results. It's still the same. So what you see here is like a little tool on the very top. You see, okay, this is like one query that could potentially come into the bot, and there are like 10 versions which are basically run simultaneously with our box, and the results. Different colors mean different kinds of response types we have in the chatbot, and you see there's actually some variation happening. That also depends, of course, on the simulation of the customer that's going on, but still it helps us to figure out how much of a variability is in there. And, of course, if you look into results, you can also find fun stuff. So this is a little bit of a specific evaluation. So our supervisors is also being asked, how good was the product recommendation that the conversation gave? And this was the funny thing. So the actual chatbot had this augmentation saying, okay, your knowledge cutoff is somewhere in the past, but recently there was this Apple event announcing iPhone 17, so our chatbot knew about it, the supervisor didn't. And that's what happens then. The supervisor tells me, or tells us, oh, your chatbot is hallucinating, because apparently I don't know iPhone 17. So it's just a little mistake, easy to fix. But the whole point I'm trying to make here, you have to look into actual results to make this work. So nothing really new going on there. So for me and for you, the key takeaways I have here, distributed hybrid search is a complex thing. In our case, it's worth the money, because I can tell you that actually having this kind of setup has a positive ROI. That's what I can at least tell you here. The making it work, make it right, make it fast approach, having fast iterations of small experiments, not doing all the perfect architecture in the very beginning also worked for us. We have now like 25% smaller infrastructure cost, improved latency. And my personal hot take on vector search and hybrid search is it might become a data tool in the future, which is basically, okay, you have to be fast, you have to be doing, nobody's going to be interested in what's happening there, it should be good. That's it. So I can fill in the actual use cases. And with that, I will end with, as I mentioned before, that in our case, and I think in a lot of other cases, search is and will be a team sport. And that's why I would like to thank our teams, Nucleus, Jarvis, Darwin, Reptile, and a few key contributors like Dennis, Flo, Chambrock, Victoria, Thorsten, and Toby for contributing on making this happen. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Jens. Do we have questions from the audience?
Thank you, very insightful talk. So I'm curious how you think about, because you mentioned you have this positive ROI on, adding more like hybrid search to your stack. Do you have any thoughts on what will happen when you start adding LLMs like conversational search, as well as how do you marry like the security aspects, like how the LLMs respond and so on, like how that can impact the business, as well as kind of cost of ownership of adding these new LLMs, and maybe you need to have extra infrastructure costs and so on.
Okay, so that was like 3 questions in one. So the first one was about the ROI thing. So ROI, in our case, I don't know if it will continue to grow. So there is a point of diminishing returns. And I guess we are somewhat near that or already there. Hard to tell. That's only, you can look into the business figures. The second part is LLM ownership kind of thing. Yeah, we're just building it. So we have like the approach we are using. We're going to bring this to production. It's, I would say, in a reasonable amount of cost. What I'm trying to reference here would be this. Sorry. This. So the goal is not to use much more than this space that was opened here in terms of ownership. But of course, ownership is not just infrastructure costs, but also like in investment costs. So, you know, doing research and stuff. And that's what we learn right now. There's a lot of things to look after when working with LLMs, like, you know, variability in results and things like that. So this kind of variability thing is going to be, we're going to use business metrics to look into this. And security aspect, yeah, that's a whole other talk for, I think, several conferences. It's difficult. And it's not so easy to measure, actually. So you have to make sure, I would say the recommendation is have a red team inside your house, making sure they know the use case, they know somehow what's going on in your implementation, and then they can basically fire what they can come up with. In our case, the risk is somewhat low because all we present to the customers is public data. So there's nothing related to really like compliancy cases. You know, that makes it a little bit easier, but still, it's like a rabbit hole for itself.
Okay, an online question. Maybe can you briefly say how you're storing and managing your search indices? So a more technical question.
The first part, I didn't get the first part.
How are you storing or managing your search indices?
Okay, so, well, to be honest, it's like a lexical search is still a good old-fashioned Solr. So it's a Solr index off the shelf with a lot of fancy, you know, rules into it. And then we have like semantic, which is served by our team Darwin, and they do it on their own. So it's like really like custom specific teams. They have query to product models, they have query to query models, and do all the embedding works themselves. Because in the very beginning of the project, they looked into the vector search engines and our non-functional and functional requirements, and they found there was no real support for the case at that time.
Okay. Questions from here?
So you mentioned the search like API needing to work for, you know, LLM agent, let's say, in your own conversational app. If we move to a world where, you know, your users are now asking agents to buy products for them, etc., would you envisage exposing a search API, or would you expect other agents to, you know, talk to your agent, and how do you think about that?
It's a good question. I honestly would say it's like looking into the future, so I don't know. I guess both of that is going to be happening. So there might be agents coming from providers that have this kind of chat experiences on their own, like OpenAI and things like that. But we still see the case, like we have it now, that we also need to carry them within our experience with the brand itself. So I'm not really sure if that answers the question or if I somehow moved into different directions. So the question was about like, will there only be agents talking to our search?
Yeah, so I think about, sorry. I will clarify. So like if you think about kind of, you know, someone might find auto products via like a Google search, let's say, because they could index your page. So like in the agentic version of this, would it be like I ask my agent and it can hit your search API, or does it have to go through Google? Or you know, like, is there an evolution of this where actually like retailers like yourself start thinking, oh, maybe we should have API access to our products for agents? Or would, you know, the agent talk to your agent that you kind of put in front of that? Like, how would you expose it differently in that new world?
Okay, you have to put some, you know, a few guards on there on the API itself. As we are like a big enterprise, this is already within the realm of like a API gateway. So this is already there, and I think the thing you could envision technically is that you make this like a public version and then put on tool access on top of it, but it's like a business decision whether or not you want to move fast and make it available to agents or to specific agents, maybe like OpenAI indexing agent or something like that. I don't know. That's more like a business question. I'm not feeling brave enough to answer today.
Okay, I got a quick online question. How many search-related teams are there in Otto? And is search functionality owned by a specific group, or is this somehow shared?
Well, it's shared across teams. So like I said, we have a few teams that are responsible, or actually 2 at the moment, that are responsible for selecting products. So this is basically doing the matching part. And we do have this re-ranking part as like do business re-ranking based on business numbers and conversions, clicks, and things like that. And we also do have like the suggest, like a small team, but I think this is it's changing over time. So I would say it's more or less like a group of people that change between different kinds of responsibilities.
Okay, so we're at time, sorry. Thanks, Jens, again for your great talk, and please remain.
Thank you.